Well, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to Zyxel's Tech Talk. My name is Tri Nguyen. I am the product manager and market development manager here in North America. Good to have you today. We want to talk about some of the switches that we offer, kind of a quick switch 101, some of the feature functions, maybe where you want to use it, and just how to kind of make the most of what you're doing in that core network, making sure that that is your infrastructure that is not overlooked. I think a lot of partners or maybe your customers themselves don't see, or may potentially don't see the kind of the significance of and the importance of having a solid switch network, since all these different applications, whether it be voice, video, data, your wireless APs, your cameras, they're all residing and being powered by these switches. And if something is broken within that network, or there's some security issues that are existing within that network on the switch layer, then it can cause some, unforeseen issues and make it hard for you to troubleshoot those kinds of, applications. So I wanted to cover that today and share with you our product portfolio, as well as the technologies and the feature functions that might be interesting to you. Hopefully you'll take something away today that allows for you to say, hey, there's something there that Zyxel has that I can really utilize and take advantage of, and maybe that I didn't know about that Zyxel has, and maybe just dispel some maybe some misconceptions of when to use switches, in a certain capacity, or which models to use. So hopefully that will help you out. So today, also I wanted to mention, if you're new to the webinar, I always like to have it interactive. So if you have a question during the webinar, please use the Q&A section box there, and I will try to get to them in line with my presentation. And then we'll have some question time at the end as well, if I didn't get to those questions. So, please feel free to chat with me and make this interesting time for you, and also an informative time for you as well. So Zyxel Networks has been in business for over 30 years, since 1989. 100 million devices connected. We have 150 global markets with us, over 700 employees worldwide. 1 million businesses work smarter with Zyxel solutions today. We are partnered with, or you have us as a partner. Our sales account managers, or channel account managers, David, Andy, and Jacob, service the North American side. We are here to be your advocates, whether it be pre-sales, post-sales, in getting pricing, distribution, questions, anything like that. We're here to assist you and provide you the support that you need. So please, take advantage of that. We're trusted to deliver connections in a lot of different applications, and a lot of different brands have been using our solutions to deliver to their customers. So connectivity is our forte, what we, deal with any kind of network that is there. So any partners who work with us in our award-winning platforms and our award-winning products worldwide, they're able to facilitate those connectivities to their customers and deliver applications, things like that we've partnered with some of the industry leaders out there, companies like McAfee, Norton, Webroot, Bitdefender, to provide security solutions within our product and applications, and then partnering with, wireless and network AV companies, and also cloud companies, to make sure that it's all of our products are compatible and work within that system as well. And we're solutions driven, and by clients like yourself, because we make the product and the hardware, we're able to facilitate any kind of solutions that you find, or maybe things and features that you think may help you with your day-to-day, or even for your customer experience. So we work to deliver different types of verticals, as well as providing you the entire kind of ecosystem of the network as well. Because we are a networking company, we have a full comprehensive portfolio in the network capacity. So anything that connects to a network, Zyxel probably has something. You may be only exposed to kind of the channel side, your typical security appliances, wireless solutions, your Ethernet switching with PoE, gateway hotspots, and then network management. But we also have a full line of a lot of kind of service provider type products, in DSLAMs and GPON, those kinds of technologies, LTE, that you can also look into and take advantage of as well. So just keep us in mind, anything that connects to a network, we probably have something that connects to it. And so today I wanted to cover the wired portion of our solutions, the networking switch. And I think that, to me, that's one of the important parts that people typically don't realize. Like I mentioned earlier, they may have an older generation of switches that have old technology for PoE, or they're using it, in a capacity where there's no security implementations in there, or they're just using something off the shelf that has no management capabilities, no visibility into what's happening on that network from a switch core perspective. So that can hamper and maybe make it difficult for you to troubleshoot some issues that may arise, and not knowing where maybe the packet is coming from, or maybe which port the customer is connected to. So this can help facilitate that. So I think building that core is very important. Understanding some of the switch naming conventions, like you've seen in my other webinars before, but just as a reminder, most of our switches are all GS now. It's gigabit, so it's a gigabit switch. The MG switches are multi-gig switches. They're typically on our kind of a low end, our small business type products, are MG. Our XS switch, the X just stands for the Roman numeral of 10, so that's a 10 gig capable switch with all 10 gig capable ports or multi-gig ports. The XGS is a gigabit switch by nature, so it has gigabit ports, but has dedicated 10 gig uplinks or multi-gig uplinks. The XMG switches, they're all typically multi-gig switches, so it's multi-gig ports with 10 gig uplinks typically. If it ends in HP, it's a PoE or PoE++ switch. EP is an economic or eco-friendly power budget, and FP is for our higher power budgets, typically PoE Plus and PoE++. And if it ends in F, it stands for a fiber switch. And so if you're interested in learning more about fiber switches, I did a webinar probably a couple times ago, maybe about a month ago, or maybe it was last week. It seems like time flies these days anyways. I think it was last week where we did a fiber switch webinar, and it went kind of in more detail about fiber in itself, and kind of the nature of when to use fiber, which multi-modes, what's the difference between multi-mode, single mode, et cetera. So the fiber ports that you deal with is the SFP or SFP Plus currently. The SFP is just the gigabit transceivers fiber, and the SFP Plus will take a 10 gig transceiver. So each fiber port there, you can see they look like those little squares, and they require a module, a transceiver module that goes into them. And each one can determine what kind of fiber you're using and the distances that you're using. So I did mention about the kind of the differences between single mode and multi-mode fiber. So on a physical perspective, single mode is just a kind of a smaller core there on the fiber. And then the multi-mode is easier to work with. And it's the typical one that most people use today are, the larger core there. You can see the differences between the speeds on that table. So the fiber distances that it can go to. You can see the single mode fiber is very more like concentrated. It's more direct, kind of straight line beam of light in a sense that allows for it to travel, up to 5,000 meters or even 10 kilometers to do 10 gig at 10 kilometers. Whereas the multi-mode fiber typically people use are into kind of the shorter distances, but still be able to do short distance, but give you even larger capacities on the OM3 fiber or OM5. So being able to go up to eventually 25 gig, 40 gig, and 100 gig type connectivity. So we have those switches coming up in the future, where you'll have a core of fiber connectivity that can allow for you to do, 25 gig, 40 gig, and 100 gig type uplinks, or even based on the ports themselves. So we have that coming out probably in about a year. A single mode fiber, there, like I mentioned, they can be used for short distance runs, but its main use is, I think, is for the long distance cable runs. It provides the high bandwidth support up to 10 gig at the long distances. it has lower kind of cable costs, but the electronics means like the transceivers themselves or even the switches that can handle that is typically more expensive. And it's harder to terminate the single mode fiber because of the smaller core size within that fiber. In multi-mode, it's typically used for more short distance runs, less than 1,000 feet. It can still support your high bandwidth. In fact, it actually supports up to like 100 gig on those distances. It has a higher cable cost, but it's easier to terminate, and it's costs less to buy and find those transceivers since they're more mass marketed, mass accepted. Some other considerations about the fiber itself, single mode or multi-mode. You would typically choose multi-mode because it's cost effective in those short distances. But if you have a long haul, you have no choice but to use kind of the single mode fiber and transceivers accordingly. The cost of the cable for multi-mode is greater than that of the single mode, but it's easier to install. So you kind of have to factor that into your install time, termination of the fiber, et cetera. Single mode transceivers can cost up to 4 to 5 times more than the multi-mode. Again, it's kind of the optics of it, how much power and light is being pushed through it, and also, the distances that it can traverse. So even in some cases, it can go up to 80 kilometers. And I'll show you a scale in our accessory list in just a moment. Multi-mode consumes less power also than single mode. So that means less heat. So when you're putting them into your cabinets, et cetera, that may or may not have good cooling, that's something to consider, that you might have to think about how to cool it, or just keep things in general cooler to make it more efficient in its optics, and so that you also don't have burnouts. One of the things that people may end up doing is, well, I do have questions where people ask, well, what if I just buy like a 10-kilometer transceiver and I can just use it for anything, right? Like universalize it. One, the cost is going to be more, but two, if you're going to use it for shorter distances, the likelihood of you burning out those transceivers is a lot higher, because now you're pushing, a lot of kind of power through it, light through it, and it's, going to burn out some of the optics that potentially is there. So definitely you have to use what you need, and kind of measure that or keep that into mind. Multi-mode optical fiber, like I mentioned earlier, is easier to install and terminate in the field as well. And because it's readily available, most people can find certain types of multi-mode fiber that is very flexible, very forgiving when terminating and also when installing. So it pulls like an Ethernet cable, and you don't have to worry about it damaging, because of obviously if the fiber itself is crinkled or cracked or damaged, then the light is not going to be able to traverse that optimally. So these are some of the transceivers that we offer today. You can see the SFP, and you'll see SFP 10G models. The 10G obviously are 10 gigabit SFPs, different types of connectors, different wavelengths that it goes by, but those wavelengths allow for it to go those different distances. So you'll see like an SR will go your, a third of a kilometer type distance, so like 100 meters or so. And the LR type transceivers can go up to 10 kilometers. So again, you have to pick what you want. You'll see products like in here that have a -E to it. So the -E just stands for like an economy pack. So those typically come bundled as a 10 pack of transceivers and gives you a significant cost reduction, cost discount when you buy it in that 10 pack. So if you are using transceivers today, or you have projects, be sure to look into and quote out kind of the E models. And if you do have a lot of demand for transceivers today, and you are currently buying the kind of the standalone single pieces, please reach out to your sales rep and let them know kind of your average, kind of notify them that you want to buy more of the economy pack versions, so that you'll have them in stock on your prem, and so that you can take advantage of those cost discounts. But because we don't quite have as much stock as we do of the single models, we just want to make sure we have those in place from a forecasting perspective, and we have them in stock for you if that's the one that you're going to transition to. So again, communicate with your sales rep on that. So you'll have also our, SX, LX. You'll see some with different bandwidths or different signal strength or a send receive. There's, different connectors like a LC connector or a duplex LC or a single LC that runs on a single fiber. And then you'll have transmit and receive that can be delivered through that single fiber using different wavelengths on the transmit side and on the receive side. So typically on those models, like the BX 1310, you would pair it with a 1490 because you can see, let me see if I could bring up my my pointer here. Since this is Switch 101, I want to make sure I covered this because sometimes people don't realize that. So the BX 1310, you'll see that the transmit is on 1310 nanometers, and the receive signal wavelength is on 1490. So what you need to do is you need to pair that with a 1490-10, where the transmit is now 1490 and the receive is 1310, because it's a communication. One is transmitting at 1310 and one is receiving at 1310. And then the opposite is happening there too, right? So they have to pair together so that they can communicate on a single strand on two different wavelengths. And the same happens with a BX 1550 and a 1310. So you can see there is a BX 1310-E here. This is just a special model that we have on a single LC that again, you have to get the right pair in order for it to communicate.
I found this on the web.
Thank you, Siri. So then we also have direct attach cables. Those are our DAC 10 gig and our DAC 10 gig 1 meter and 3 meters. And those are shown here. They're great for uplinking your switches as long as they're within the same rack. Those direct attached storages devices, sorry, not direct storage, direct attached cables can reach 9 feet within the rack to uplink via 10 gig, and it already has transceivers built into that fiber cable. So there's no need for termination. It's just more of a plug and play, just like you would with an Ethernet cable, and be able to take advantage of the SFP plus ports to be able to do that. Now, if you have multiple SFP plus ports on a switch, you can get multiple DAC cables and do a link aggregation between them as well. So you can get like a 20 gig connection between the two switches. So you might be able to take advantage of that as well, that you might not be doing today. So you have your modules that go the different distances with the different modes of fiber, different connectors, again, single fiber connector or multi-mode or multi-duplex connectors on them. But then we also have something that people may not realize that we have. It's an SFP 10G-T. What it does is it converts an SFP plus 10 gig transceiver port into an Ethernet 10 gig copper port. So you may have those floating around and you're like, hey, I can't use this SFP plus because I don't have anything that plugs into it. I'm not using fiber. I'm not using it for uplinking. You might be able to use this transceiver to convert it into Ethernet and be able to now plug in a 10 gig NIC card on a server, on a storage device, whatever it may be, or even to maybe uplink to another 10 gig switch that doesn't have an SFP plus port, for example. So you have options there. The cost on it, sometimes it just, again, depends on if you already have it there. It's not that expensive, but it's not as cheap as just buying a, another, just a low end 10 gig copper port switch maybe. But again, it's something that might be there. You don't have the space for it. You want to just take advantage of the ports that you already have there. So with switches, the main application that we do see today is PoE. PoE obviously delivers power to a lot of different devices that are out there today. There could be access points, there's voice over IP phones, there's access control panels, there's digital signage boxes, there are IP cameras. There's a lot of those kinds of applications that could be used with PoE. And of course, the power classification has progressed through the years as well. We were, in 15.4 watts. We moved in the current 30 watt space, which still, I think, is the dominant PoE power option today. But we're starting to move and see the PoE++, the Ultra PoE 802.3 BT with a 60-watt power capacity on on these devices and on that draw. Let's see, Wayne asks, are transceivers available through distribution yet? Yeah, so all of our transceivers should be available in distribution. If you look at our price list that you can get from our sales reps there, our sales managers, there should be a column that has the distribution and their exact like part code if you can't find it directly. I know a lot of when you try to search for transceivers, sometimes it's buried because everybody calls them pretty much the same thing. They're, SFP dash, LC or LX and SX type. So there's probably a bunch of different ones that pop in, but if you want the specific Zyxel models, then those are available in that part code. And again, if you have some problems and you just need suggestions on what to look for, we can help you with that as well. So please drop us a line. Now, there could be in some cases where, because the transceivers aren't as certain models aren't, I would say, like purchased as often, and sometimes they may fall off the listing on distribution. So if you do find that, or you can't find it, and we notice that it has fallen off, then we'll have to re-skew that back up in that particular distribution to make sure that it's available, but it should be available. So the PoE is important because, again, those applications, you want to be able to maximize your power budget, but still deliver enough power to those devices. And even though PoE says, hey, it's a 30-watt PoE kind of technology, the actual wattage that is being delivered in that standard is less than that number, right? We deal with this all the time with throughputs and everything. So even PoE has those theoretical 30-watt is its max, but at the actual PoE device, at those devices that are being powered, a 30-watt PoE port can only deliver 25.5 watts. And so if you have devices that can consume or draw or require more than 25.5 watts, you have to bump up to the 60-watt application. Now, we do have some products like our access points on our higher end that need to be fully powered with 60 watts because it draws about 33 watts. It's going to still work when you plug it into a 30-watt PoE, but what's going to happen is it's going into a degradation mode where one of maybe the radios is shut off. And so you're going to have still connectivity. It may seem like it's still working, but now it's being a degraded signal. The third radio that is offering, whether it be better channels or whatnot in 6 gigahertz or, another 5 gigahertz range, you're going to lose that. And so that would, affect your coverage, affect a lot of these kind of functionalities. So please keep that in mind when you are building these out. You want to, if you are using the latest and greatest technologies, you need to know that those ports are, PoE plus and multi-gig, so you can fully take advantage of its capabilities. Otherwise, you're going to have, this great Wi-Fi 6E that's capable of, 4 gigs of throughput, or 2.5 gigs of throughput, but you won't be able to pass it through your gigabit port. You're going to be throttled down basically to maximum of 1 gig in terms of that connectivity. So not only power, but then also the connectivity itself is very important. But I did mention that PoE, kind of the draw capabilities of our product. So what we have in the Zyxel switches is what we call consumption mode. There's two ways. One is allocated with classification and through consumption, which I actually call smart PoE or intelligent PoE. And what that does is it allows for you to power up more devices and with our products compared to a lot of the different competitors who are using classification mode. So what classification mode is, what it sounds like when a device is connected to a switch, the hardware in itself communicates in a way to tell the switch that it is a class, in this case, a class 3, which is a 15.4 watt device. So in classification mode type switches, they would budget out 15.4 watts from the budget, even though the device itself actually only draws and uses a max of 9 watts. So what's happened is that extra classification, those extra watts, the extra 6 watts is being budgeted and kind of held in a bucket that no one else can use. So what happens is, let's say you're powering up 24 of these phones, you're going to need a device that can operate at 370 watts. A lot of switches can do that. We're talking VoIP phones, so you're kind of hitting that limit. 24 ports, 370 watts is going to be your max. And so in many cases it could be enough. But if you have a couple of phones that are more than 9 watts, let's say they're doing some conference, they have some screens on there and it's drawing more, then you're going to have to reduce the number of phones that can be supported. But in consumption mode, you're only required to use or need a budget of 216 watts. So in this particular example, there's no problem kind of in both cases, but I think the bigger one is either when you're using access points or maybe you're using pan tilt zoom cameras that might require a lot more wattage. So in this particular example, the classification of this camera is a class 4, which is a 30 watt PoE. So in order just to power up 20 of these devices, you would need a PoE budget from a switch that has 600 watts to manage that. Now, with a Zyxel switch in consumption mode, since the camera only draws 16 watts, you only need 320 watts to be able to power up those same 20 cameras in this particular example. So again, you have the access to not only have enough power, you're also saving the wattage power on the power supplies themselves that you have to get for your switch, and also be able to power up more of these devices in that same capacity. So in this kind of example, there's 20 phones here. You could add a few more cameras onto this, or extra phones onto this application as well, to maximize maybe that 24 port or the 48 port switch that's there. So again, that's why we say more power more in our Zyxel smart intelligent PoE switches. Cabling is also a big factor when thinking about your switch and your core network. Most people are moving to 10 gig. Maybe by a show of hands, how many of you are already deploying or have seen demand much more for 10 gig? I know it's been a long time coming. 10 gig's been around for years and years, but I think the adoption of 10 gig for the business side is quite small, or it was very slow to adopt. Because everybody was fine with gigabit. Everybody was fine with that kind of connectivity because their internet connections were only like a 50 meg connection or maybe even 100 meg connection. So there was no reason to kind of try to push to gigabit unless you had special applications. People started hosting their own virtual servers locally. They had some VM there. They had some, maybe all of their backup and storage. All of that before the cloud kind of pushed everybody to house these storage devices and their networks to need a 10 gig backbone, so that when they're doing the backups from every device within the office back to the local storage there, that it can be done quickly and efficiently and wouldn't take hours and hours to just back up a bunch of files. So that kind of drove that application and drove the move towards 10 gig. But now we're seeing people having multi-gig connectivity potentially on the WAN side, so getting gigabit connections and also seeing up to 10 gigs of connection to an office or to to deliver to the customer, and be able to, how do you utilize that? How do you take full advantage of it? So now you're seeing more of that multi-gig and gigabit support with access points, with a lot of the other applications that are able to facilitate that and move people off of a bottleneck that might exist. You can imagine if you had just a gigabit switch with no 10 gig uplinks and you had 15 access points and people were all trying to utilize like 1 gig connectivity or maybe storage, etc. They're all going to get crunched down into like a 1 gig pipe. So, 24 people all doing backups, they're all trying to get to a 1 gig uplink port, right? So maximizing the uplinks, being able to expand that pipe, will help to facilitate the traffic moving through that network as well. And then also give you overhead so that the quality of services are not impacted when things are congested. It's like a freeway. If you have a 1-lane freeway and everybody's crunching through that, 5 lanes come into one, of course, there's going to be a lot of traffic. But then if you're able to open up those lanes, add extra lanes in there, the traffic flow is much smoother. There's less stop and go. There's the traffic is able to move and flow through freely. And the cabling itself is going to be something you need to evaluate. Sometimes it might be hard when you're going into a new installation or maybe taking over an installation from somebody to know what is in the walls. But I think it's very important because it can affect how you're delivering PoE, how you're delivering the data across that. So if people are looking to do, multi-gig, 5 gig, 10 gig connectivity at the full distances, you're going to need to get to like a Cat 6A cable to go 100 meters, doing full 10 gig and delivering 60 watts of PoE. Now, if you only need 5 gig, then that's fine. You can use Cat 5e, Cat 6 there, but know your limitation. Know like what the cable is capable of doing. So you want to make sure that that is there. So having the right switch, having the right cabling, the right fiber, all of that is a factor within that network. Now, I did mention that our switches had a lot of different features, and in previous webinars, I kind of just glanced over these features, but today I wanted to kind of go line by line on these kind of selling points, because I think some of these features are very important that people don't realize that Zyxel has. Understanding the switch network itself is very important. People always ask me, they're always approached with a project that says, hey, I need a full layer 3. I'm certified and I need a layer 3 for everything. And when I finally dig into it, when we finally ask about the project, like, what are you utilizing layer 3 for? Well, most of the time it's just VLAN and bandwidth control, which for that is typically on, the layer 2 option. You're not doing any special routing. You're just pushing packets through different VLANs. You're trying to prioritize that. That could all be managed within this switch, offering on the layer 2 side in most of our switches there. But we do have options to get you to the layer 3 offerings as well. So VLAN, voice VLAN, automatic based VLANs on different OUIs, different MAC addresses. You can do it by maybe IP ranges as well to throw people into specific VLANs. Obviously, that's not as secure because people can spoof their IPs as a static IP and kind of gain access to that VLAN. Again, if that's important to you, then you wouldn't want to do it that way. You're able to also do things like MAC learning, so you can put some different port securities on it as well. You can auto detect from a network perspective, auto detect and almost like reactivate and recover connected PoE devices. So if you have maybe an access point that should be there, and that port typically always has traffic running through it some way or another, even if it's some, heartbeat type connectivity. And if that disappears for, let's say, 30 seconds, it could actually initiate a kind of almost like a recovery, function where it will PoE power reboot the device that's on that port to see if it can come back online. So there are those aspects to make sure that your network is always available. This is also useful for IP camera type applications, since the camera is technically always sending a data feed all the time. So there should always be transmits of packets and receives for packets, mostly obviously the receive through the switch. So the camera is transmitting that. So there should always be packets going through. And if it detects there's nothing, usually the person who's watching that CCTV has a little black screen on that camera, something's turned off. And so this will actually help to power cycle and reboot that. How many of you have had that case where you had to call a customer and say, hey, can you go to your switch and go to port number 18? Can you pull that out and then plug it back in again? How often is that? Or you'd have to roll a truck where your technician, that's all they had to do. So this gives you that visibility, gives you that automated function there. And also you can set it for alerts and alarms. So if it did do that power cycle and it did do that port recovery, then you can get a notification that says, hey, this particular port on that switch was rebooted due to this factor. And it's come back online. So that way you can keep an eye on it as well. Maybe it's starting to fault, maybe that camera is starting to fail there. And you want to be able to watch that. If it happens more often, maybe then you send the truck out there. But a lot of cases, most things just need to be reset. A lot of electronics just need to be power cycled sometimes, and so this can help you with that functionality. I did mention already earlier about the intelligent PoE. You can power up to twice as many devices on a single switch as our competitors who use classification mode. CCTV, IPTV broadcast reporting functionalities. If you're doing any of that and you need those kinds of reports to provide to your customers, again, to show value, those are available within our Switch platform as well. Machine learning to identify network issues, things like broadcast storms, being able to use it to block or maybe to auto correct some of the network with the way that the traffic is moving through the network. We can do that when you're using our Nebula Cloud platform to be able to be the controller that manages all of these particular network switches. We want people to have visibility into the network as well. I know a lot of IT in the break fix world who basically have little to no visibility on the kind of the core networks or maybe even the switch network area when they're trying to troubleshoot a customer. And if you're wanting to do this remotely, that's very difficult if you have no way to get in, no way to check packets, no way to do have any visuals of what might even be connected into that network. So within our platform, in the kind of our pro package, we have our automated network topology that it can detect the different ports, different devices to see how things are connected or interconnected with each other and be able to spit that out to a kind of a visual network map. And that can also help to point to maybe some rogue devices that are there, or maybe the way that the network is being connected is why it's causing maybe a broadcast storm or something like that. You can visualize the ports, the switches themselves kind of more virtually as a stack if you needed to. You can check the port statuses and the connected device information as well, and you can drill into the ports to get to the clients. So it's a very intuitive kind of click through method of managing and troubleshooting. You get real-time port and PoE utilization information, and then you have access to different types of diagnostic tools to do remote cable testing, for doing fiber testing, et cetera, as well. So there's a lot of troubleshooting and visibility that typically you had to build maybe a backdoor into your network, where our Nebula Cloud platform with utilizing our switches allow for you to have these kinds of tools and access to begin to troubleshoot those networks. And it gives you that visibility. To me, I think the IT person's like worst nightmare is not knowing what is going on or not having access. That's why in the past, right? I think we've all been culprits of, yeah, I'm going to put a little back door here. I'm going to open up this port so I can remote desktop to this computer. I'll make sure I have a VPN. We got more sophisticated. We say, okay, now we're doing a VPN. It's more encrypted. It's more secure this way. And then you start locking down. So it's like, you can only access that VPN from this computer or this IP address, right? So we started doing those things, but ultimately we wanted a way to get into the network so that we can locally check maybe the local configuration. Maybe we can check, do some sort of packet analysis or packet sniffing with, Wireshark or something like that. So there's a lot of things that are, again, of value within this platform and within these products that allow for you to better utilize and better troubleshoot those types of networks. Being able to make sure that your network is clean, clear, and also secure to delivering these applications for Wi-Fi, for voice, for video, for data. We've been doing a lot of webinars, roadshows, and Top Golf events where we discuss this specifically. If you are a service provider or even a VoIP provider, or maybe whatever application you're providing, but you don't control the network, and that happens a lot. Maybe they have an IT person and the IT installed the network, and you're trying to piggyback that to deliver guest network services, voice services, video services, whatever it may be. But because you have no control over that network, there's a lot of finger pointing that happens. Well, my voice is having poor quality because your IT person doesn't prioritize this. And since we don't have control over that, we're just at the we're at we have to kind of acquiesce to whatever that IT manager has available to us. So we want to make sure that you can get, and you have the ability to get control over the entire network, still providing them with all the services that they want, but be able to protect your application so that you don't get called from that customer to say that your service is the one that's failing. You can reliably look at it, and also you can prevent that by optimizing that network, making sure that the switch configurations are backed up so that any downtime is very minimal, because just a swap and replace, that configuration could be quickly loaded back into that. Since everything's saved in the cloud, you have port and user security. It can do 802.1x authentication with even two-factor authentication, and user-friendly ACLs that you can use to make sure that it's locked down. You can do Mac learning. People don't realize some of our kind of our mid-tier and higher tier switches have auto Mac learning, where you would install the network. You have the APs and the computers and the servers that are connected to it all there and up and running. You can click a button to learn the MAC addresses of those devices and put basically no other MAC addresses can connect or can pass traffic through this network except for those devices. The reason for that is people don't realize that there could be an Ethernet port that's just down the hall, and it's plugged into a switch, and somebody could just put an access point. They can put their own device that has no security on it, or they can maybe just directly connect to it. Maybe somebody's doing something malicious that they can inject things into the network that way as well. Now you can prevent that from happening. You can allow for the control over that and the security so that it doesn't work, or maybe it just anything else goes to a guest network, right? So you can push that over to those separate guest network VLANs per se. So it can kind of prevent that. Network protection, including loop guard and DHCP guard. So DHCP guard is what it kind of sounds like. It prevents DHCP. So people will ask, well, why would you prevent DHCP? Well, unauthorized DHCP. So you can make the switches learn and be assigned that, hey, when you get DHCP packets from this port, then that's allowed because it's coming from the DHCP server, or it's coming from the gateway device that's on there that's delivering DHCP. It prevents a user from accidentally or maliciously putting in their own router or their own DHCP server and connecting that to the same network and breaking the network for anybody who grabs an IP address. So they'll get the wrong gateway, or you can utilize some bad vectors. Could be that they use that firewall or whatever their DHCP device to point people to come to their malicious network or maybe device that offers them kind of the wrong DNS, the wrong IP. It might look like you can still go to the internet the way that they have it configured. So you can still look like you're acting normal, but the DNS server that they're giving to you that you're using to translate those addresses could be pointing you, when you're going to Google, it goes to a Google, but it's a malicious looking Google, right? So it looks like you're doing Google, but it's something malicious, can inject, code or try to find ways to take advantage of it. So there are those aspects that we want to make sure, again, that the network is at least considered from a security standpoint, especially now with not only cybersecurity, but network security in itself. You could be attacked on the inside, you can be attacked on the outside as well. And making sure that network is always available, doing link aggregation, doing ring topologies and using RSTP to kind of prevent those storms, and switch routing as well to moving packets between maybe different networks or different IP ranges or MAC ranges across the switch network there. Deployment is a big thing as well. Switches is not so much as access points where you have many of them, but if you are doing larger deployments in a project, you may have 10 to 15 switches that are there. And so being able to auto provision them, be able to back up and restore, be able to clone switches between even multiple sites is very important as well. You may have a customer that has multiple retail stores and their profile is all the same. So rather than having to reconfigure every site, you can clone them and translate those templates over to any one of those other sites to help you quickly deploy and quickly configure those switches as well. So you can synchronize those settings between the switches within the sites. So it really helps with the deployment and auto provisioning. As long as the devices themselves can get internet connectivity, it calls home to the Nebula Cloud and says, hey, who do I belong to? What's my identity? And here's my firmware, here's the configuration files that gets downloaded to it, within minutes. So you can see when you tack that on with access points, you can multiply that to, 40 to hundreds of devices within that network to get provisioned. So the time, the more difficult time, I guess the longer time is just physically installing them or, mounting them up. But from the configuration standpoint, once you have your configuration solid, it's pretty easy to get that all up and running. So from a product perspective, we kind of break it up into 3 lines. We call it simplicity, flexibility, and ultimate series. And so the flexibility, I think, is where most of our partners sit because it's easier to go up or down from that point. So you have your good, better, best options there. We also have something that's called effortless because these are just kind of plug and play type devices. Most of our business class switches are more, it's manageable at some point, but we do carry a line that is just, unmanaged or very simply managed type products. And that's primarily delivered into, the home type or the I say professional consumer type spaces. But you may be using something like this. If you need to PoE inject at 60 watt, give you 5 gig of a multi-gig Ethernet connector with 60 watt, the PoE 12-60W is what you want to use. And if you want to inject 30 watt PoE and be capable of up to 2.5 gigs of throughput, then the PoE 12-30W is going to be your option there. Now, it's also backwards compatible, so you could go 60 watt, but only have gigabit, ports. It will auto negotiate that. So there's no problem there if you don't fully utilize the 5 gig there and need just 60 watt. So you can PoE inject maybe those one-off APs or the one-off cameras that need that type of power. The 1915 is our simplicity model. It's the first baseline of product that is managed as standalone via web, and then also manageable in our Nebula Cloud. So you can use these in standalone or in cloud. It's our Nebula Flex. So this is the lowest end model that supports our Nebula. And so if you just need a quick, cost-effective, low PoE budget because you're doing voice applications and don't need a large PoE budget, these are smaller form factor, lower PoE, also the most cost-effective, but still give you the option to manage and provision these in the Nebula Cloud platform. Our 1350 series is more geared towards a CCTV type network, even though we have customers using this for both voice and Wi-Fi applications as well. It just depends on, kind of the configurations. The main thing I think that people like this range is that it also offers like a 16 port PoE switch option, whereas our standard models don't have a 16 port. We go from 8 to 24 to 48. But this one has a 6 port, a 5 port, a 8 port, a 16 port, 24 port. And it offers what we call extended range capabilities. So the hardware allows for you to take an existing Ethernet cable and be able to make it go up to 250 meters instead of the traditional Ethernet 100 meters. So you're getting 2.5 times the distance. So that's great for camera scenarios where you might have a building run where instead you used to have to put like an extender switch in between to pass on that data and kind of re-signal it to that camera that's down the line. But here you can go up to around 825 feet of that same Ethernet cable and be able to deliver 10 I think it's like 10 megabits per second with the 15 watts, 15.4 watts of power at that distance. So of course, if you're doing less, then it's going to be a little bit more efficient that way. But it's pushing more power. It's pushing more, to allow for that data transfer and the PoE power going that distance. So keep that in mind, that it's not for everything, and it's a toggle capability. So we have an unmanaged version where there are physical toggles. That's our 1300 series, and our 1350 is all, I would say, firmware or GUI controlled. So you can say, hey, ports 1, 2, 3, I want those to go extended range. So you flip the toggle there, and those will inject the necessary power down those physical ports. So you can control that within the cloud platform. One other feature for IP cameras, etc., is continuous PoE. So what continuous PoE means is if you have a power cycle, a power reboot, where it's not a full power off, it's a maybe configuration where it does a reboot, the power on the PoE ports will still remain delivering power to those devices. So it means that your cameras don't have to all reboot and come back online as well. So those stay kind of in a powered up state while the switch is doing their reboot, the firmware reboot, and then be able to just continue on passing that traffic through on that camera. So there's also some extra surge protection, electrostatic discharge protection on the Ethernet ports, as well as the power supply as well for these switches, because we know of the types of environments and types of devices that might be maybe outside facing, that's not as protected as they would normally be. Our 1920 series is our fully layer 2 web managed switch, and able to convert its Nebula Flex. You can convert it into a Nebula cloud management platform there. There are some fanless models that might be useful to you. Again, just better surge protection. It has offerings of the fiber uplinks, and those are gigabit fiber. And then our XGS 1930s, it's kind of the same class as those 1920s, but except it has 10 gig fiber uplinks. There's some added additional security features like static routing that's available in the XGS series. So that's why it's not an XGS 1920, it's an XGS 1930. So it's slightly some features there that's more useful for a 10 gig type switch, but you can still do it with PoE power. So you have 2448 ports with up to 375 watts of PoE. Our XS 1930s is a multi-gig version, which has 2.5, 5 gig, and 10 gig ports, whether it be copper, and then you'll have some dedicated combo ports, etc., for uplinks, either Ethernet or copper. So if you're trying to power up, I would say Wi-Fi 6 and Wi-Fi 6E APs that can need the 60 watt PoE, this is your switch that you need to go to, or at least one of the options you need to go to facilitate all ports being able to provide enough power. So in this 8 port, you'll see it has the same wattage as some of the other 24 port and 48 ports. So 375 watts in that 12 HP version of this model. And most people are starting to pick up on using the XMGs. The XMG gives you 24 multi-gig ports, 4 multi-gig up to 10 gig, and SFP plus uplinks. Gives you a very large power supply, a budget as well, 700 watts there available power. But keep in mind that there are 8 Ultra PoE 60 watt ports, and there's 20 30 watts. So it's for your mix and match. You might have a couple of cameras, pan tilt zoom, maybe a couple of the high density access points that are using Wi-Fi 6 that need the PoE++ that you are utilizing within this network. Or again, you're combining this with like an XS 1930 to get full power on all those ports for your maybe your access point network, but then be able to uplink them back through here on those 10 gig capable ports. So then now you have, this is kind of one of your main cores for that network. The GS2220 is a full layer 2 managed and has layer 3 functions in them as well. So things like layer 2 multicast, IGMP snooping, voice VLAN, and I'll be able to provide network access or network control in the Nebula Cloud platform as well. It comes included with Nebula. So if you bought this product, it includes 1 year of Nebula Pro Pack as part of its offering right off the bat. And then we have a 10 gig version of this as well. So those are the same as the other switch, but now with 10 gig capable uplinks, and also layer 3 access and stacking functionalities, and very large PoE budgets. So even on the lower end, a slightly bigger budget, 400 watts on the 24 port. The 48 port offers you a 60 watt as the standard, and then we have a 54 FP, and that has 960 watts of PoE budget. So this might be something that is very interesting to you. If you have more devices that needing higher budgets of PoE, then this could be something that you can fully utilize here. And our Access 3800 is kind of our 10 gig core type switch, maybe for a data center, or even within the local prem as kind of your main core, where you have all of your other gigabit to 10 gig switches that go and tie into these, whether it be fiber or copper. So this can, again, be your core. Maybe you have 2 or 3 of these that are all ringed together to have your 10 gig capable core with all those other devices that are gigabit, branching off from this one. And then if you're looking to become like a fiber ISP, we have a layer 3 switch that has fiber ports up to 48 ports of fiber with 10 gig uplinks. So these are gigabit fiber. Maybe you're doing an MDU that is running fiber between inside the building, and you want to deliver gigabit fiber to the prem and offer 10 gig uplinks, where that could go to the ISP itself, or just build yourself a 10 gig core. Wayne asks, is it possible to get these slides? Yes, definitely. If you want to send me an email, Wayne, I have my email address at the end of the presentation, but it's tri@zyxel.com. And I'll be glad to send you these slides as well. Anybody else who wants them as well, please send me a message. Since we only have like 5 minutes left, I'm going to skip through some of these applications that I had in here. But again, just being able to use it to connect businesses, connect offices, schools, larger applications, big, small. We have products that fulfill and can fit those different types of needs. So whether you're using it for the, the central core, you're using it to power up APs, digital signage, video, all of those kinds of applications, our products can be utilized in that. So just making sure that you pick the right one. We have some partners who may not know of the different types of switches that we do have. They purely maybe only look at it from a price perspective and not realize some of the feature functions that might be more beneficial to them for different applications that they're trying to do. So reach out to us and, tell us what you're looking for in terms of what you're trying to deliver, what application you're trying to deliver, and we'll help you to pick which type of switch is most, not only cost effective, but can facilitate that as best as it can. Because we don't want you to use a switch and then run into an issue where, well, it doesn't have that functionality or feature to help, prioritize something, that you need within that network to optimize the video or optimize the voice quality. So we want to make sure that you have that available in the education there as well. Now, we do have an education site now that you can go through as partners to get yourself, start getting yourselves to a kind of a certification level. There's no cost right now for the basic networking, and also the initial kind of the sales training side that gives you information about, the brand, and some of the products that are out there. But definitely go to our website. There's an education under the support tab. There's an education center link that you want to get to, and you can go through it itself, kind of a self-guided, video type training solution there. And then there's a test that you just have to take and pass, and you'll be certified. Then we'll be able to offer, the badge that comes with it, et cetera, that you can utilize to market your company, market yourself through the partner program. So the partner program, if you're not part of this already, we want everybody to be in gold. We set the bar fairly low. When we tell some of the new partners are qualifying sales, they were thinking that's going to be monthly, because that's what they're expecting. But 12K in 6 months, that's 2K a month in Zyxel products, selling, switches, gateways, access points. That's, in most cases, it's probably like one project. So we have a lot of customers, new customers, who literally through one project are jumped to gold. So I want you to be there because we want to give you and maximize the partnership and give you the most margin possible that we have. there and give you all the support that you need from our end. So we work through D&H, Ingram, TD Synnex, Wave, Target, and Pace. So if you're using any of those, let us know how we can help you. To join the partner program, it's free. If you want to connect with us, you can connect with us on LinkedIn, Zyxel-US-channel. And if you want to watch a recording of this video and any previous webinars that we have, you can find them also on Zyxel America channel or through our webinar link on our webpage. Now, if you want to connect with me, you can always find me on LinkedIn as well. I'd love to connect with you. If we haven't connected, it's just search for Zyxel Try and you should be able to find me. It should be a picture of me with I don't know if I had blue hair back then, but it should be a picture of me there that you can recognize. Since we only have like 1 minute, I'm just going to jump to the last screen here. If you do have questions, please send me an email, tri@zyxel.com. And I'd love to answer those or send you to the right people to answer those questions and pull in whoever needs to help you with those questions. So I'm going to give you back your, well, we just hit 12. So I was going to give you back a minute of your afternoon and your day, but I took it. So thank you for your hour. Thank you for your time spending it with me and learning more about Zyxel. I hope it's been helpful in some ways. Love your feedback on that information. And also if there's topics that you want to hear more about, more specific about, whether it be switches, gateways, or access points, let us know and we can plan that out into some future webinars as well. So until then, we look forward to talking to you again soon. And thank you for being a Zyxel partner. We'll see you again at another event or another webinar. Have a great rest of your day.